So we're on our last segment of Module 17. Let's talk about limited resources. Resources are limited all the time. We don't have unlimited supplies of water, materials, labor, or machine capacity. So those are some of the decisions that we need to make saying, well, why do we maximize our profitability based on those limited capacities? Could be labor hours and skilled labor. Could be materials and supply limitations. As I said, it could be machine hours as well. So let's take a look at an example. So we've got a bat manufacturer. The bats are made, and we have the deluxe bats and the basic bats. We have a unit selling price, we have a variable cost, we have a contribution margin, and we have a constraint called wood needed to, and measured in board feet, to produce a bat. So 2.2 board feet for the basics, 3.4 feet of the deluxe. So based on that constraint, we can do some analysis. We know what the contribution margin is, and we know what the board feet per bat is. So we're going to do a contribution margin per board foot measure. So based on the constraining resource, the materials of lumber, we measure board feet, and our deluxe bats is $12 per board foot contribution margin. Our basic bats are 13 board feet. So therefore, based on that analysis, basic bats win in terms of the decision-making process. But how about if we have multiple constraints? Okay, assume that Wilson must produce at least 2,000 of each model to remain competitive. Same material constraint of 24,000 board feet of white ash. What's the total contribution margin be when profit is maximized under the constraint? Okay, so we decided that basic bats out of the gate have a higher contribution margin and a contribution margin per board foot, but we did have to factor in the bats associated with the contribution margin per board foot of basic and deluxe when making this calculation. So limited resources, multiple constraints, subtract the board feet to be used for the minimum units of the least profitable. So that's the deluxe bat. And we're going to take that out. And what's left is what we are going to put it all towards basic bats, because that's where the higher margin and the higher profitability lays. So what's the theory of constraints? It's about bottlenecks. It's about limited access points that really can limit our production and hold us back from getting to where we want to go. And every process has a bottleneck. Production cannot take place faster than process through that bottleneck. So that's our constraint. That's our area that if we're going to address improvements in efficiency and operations, we're going to have to work on that bottleneck of relieving the pressure on that bottleneck. But the goal is to maximize throughput in the constrained environment. Throughput is sales revenue minus direct material costs associated. So management role, we need to identify the bottlenecks, schedule production to maximize the efficient use of the resources associated. We schedule production to avoid a buildup of inventory, and our job is to eliminate those bottlenecks. To support the theory of constraints, performance reports, and we get all kinds of reports in managerial accounting. We measure the utilization of those bottleneck resources. We measure the throughput. We don't encourage the full utilization of non-bottleneck resources. And we discourage the buildup of excess inventory. So if inventory is backing up at these bottlenecks, you're going through an assembly line, and we've got a bottleneck here that says, I got a whole bunch of inventory stacking up here. And I don't know if you've ever seen I Love Lucy and the candy machine that's kind of accelerating and it's going too fast. And there's the bottleneck. Can only fit so many chocolates into a box at one time. Don't care how much chocolate's being popped in to the front end saying, here's more chocolate. Well, I can only put so many in a box. And that's the limitation, and that's what you've got to work with. So we got to be careful of these bottlenecks, of these constraints, and just be aware of them as we go forward. Lots of decision-making when it comes to managerial accounting. And those are some of the things we are analyzing, trying to understand, make the best use of, and that's why the managerial accountants make the big bucks in terms of helping be most efficient, most effective, and most profitable short-term and long-term. Food for thought. We'll see you again soon.